turn this off for a minute. Okay. To call this meeting to order and fire Clay Cooper at the same time.
Second that.
Clay, you are fired. And you'll be fired at our regular meeting also. If you would, follow along with the Pledge of Allegiance and stand if you can. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you would, follow along, Marshall will give a invocation, please.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening and to be able to gather together in your spirit and in the name of community. Father, we thank you so much for bringing our mayor back home. We know that you're the great physician and the ultimate healer, and we know that you had such a hand in his growth and development. Dear Lord, I've seen this man go through many obstacles and face every single one of them head on and just triumph every time. And so it's just so wonderful to have the full team back together. And as we enter an election season, and this old band might not be together forever, so just thank you for the time we had. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Wow, thank you, Marshall. Madam Clerk, could you roll call, please?
Lucas. Howden. Cooper. Milton.
Glad to be here.
Denham.
Here.
LeBlanc. Here. Schultz.
Here.
Your Honor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. So on our agenda this evening, we're going to have a discussion on becoming a charter city. And we will get a report from, sorry, I forgot your name.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jackie Graves.
Jackie.
I'm an attorney at Lewis Rice in St. Louis. And Salon asked me to prepare and give you all a presentation this evening about what charter cities are, the logistics of becoming a charter city, just so that you all have more information about what that looks like as you all consider whether or not Branson wants to become a charter city.
So, Jackie, if you would, before you begin, would you share a little bit about your firm's experience and your experience with providing guidance for cities to become a charter city, please?
Sure. So I'll just introduce myself a little bit more, which is that I'm the leader of our municipal law, zoning, and finance group. That's a practice group within our firm, which is generally municipal law. I'm the city attorney for 2 different municipalities. We also represent a number of additional municipalities beyond that. And each of the cities that I work for are charter cities. One is has a mayor managed, one is a city administrator managed, one is or several are city manager managed. So I've really had the experience of what it looks like to operate under a charter, what works, what doesn't work. One of our senior counsel at the firm, his name is John Hessel. I took over as city attorney for both the city of Kirkwood and the city of Florissant from John. And John actually took both of those cities through becoming a charter city. So between myself and John, we would certainly have the experience both becoming a charter city, what that process looks like, and the ins and outs of how a charter city works, what doesn't, what we've seen. So that's sort of my background and experience.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie.
So I know that sometimes you don't quite know what a charter city is. I know that you all are a fourth-class city, but charter cities and cities around the state have been, I would say it happened more in the 80s, but more as cities become a higher population or become more sophisticated, they look into becoming a charter city. So other cities like Republic and Nixa are already home rule charter cities. The city of Ozark and the city of Monette, actually I'm from Monette, that's my hometown, have been working to become charter cities. Both Ozark and Monette have on their ballot in April 2026 the question of whether to become charter cities and whether to elect commissioners to the charter if they decide yes to go forward. There are currently 41 home rule charter cities in Missouri, and they're of really all sizes. They're as low as 4,000 people up to 430,000 people. And so I think the question is, why would Branson be interested in becoming a charter city? You're already a fourth-class city. You have a background and experience in that. The way you operate is set forth in state statutes, and so you look to those state statutes, and that's what you do. Pretty straightforward. So why would you want to be a charter city versus a fourth-class city? Well, the fourth-class city, as I said, it makes it easy because the statutes already say how to operate as a fourth-class city. But sometimes when cities become more sophisticated or have bigger budgets or want to do more unique things where you don't just follow what the state statute says that you should do, you might be interested in becoming a charter city. That means under the Constitution that a charter city has all powers which the General Assembly has the authority to confer upon a city, which basically means as long as you put it in your charter and allow the city to have a particular power, then you can do basically anything. You're not constrained by the Chapter 79, which is what sets forth what a fourth-class city can do in the state. So it's a question of, do you want basically all the powers, or do you want, the box that the General Assembly has given to cities of this size? It gives you more options. So what does it mean? Becoming a charter city really allows the community to govern itself rather than rely on those statutes, which say what fourth-class cities can do. Essentially, the charter is like your Constitution. It's not replacing your ordinances. It's sort of on top of your ordinances. So instead of looking to the state statutes when you say, well, when are our elections, and what are the terms, and a lot of other things, instead of looking to state law, you're going to look to your charter. The charter is where all of that is laid out. And so what that means is, again, you can make it fit your community, what you all want, rather than what the state statute already provides. Rather than this one-size-fits-all for a particular population size, you can have more flexibility and more control over your future. Because it's like a constitution, it means that the voters have to vote on it and approve it. It also means that if you want to amend it, the voters have to vote on an amendment if they want to change it. So that's why your charter does not cover everything under the sun. It only covers sort of the governance and the big picture, the constitution type things of how you run your city, and not the nitty-gritty, not your zoning, not your, just your little things. All of those will stay in the ordinances. And that's really on purpose. And you want to keep that charter pretty broad because, again, if you want to change things, you don't want to have to go back to the voters necessarily, unless it's something that it's really important that you say, no, this is the way we want it to be, and we want it to be really hard to change that. So, in short, the charter lets your residents decide how your city will work. Oh, I jumped ahead a little bit. But essentially, like this slide says, it acts as the city's constitution. It gives you flexibility. It gives you customization. It lets you have a faster response to local challenges. If there's an issue that you see and you need legislation right now, and it's not allowed, you may have to go to the General Assembly and ask for their help. If you have a charter city, you may or may not have to go to the General Assembly. It may be something that your charter already allows you to do. Or maybe you can amend your charter, which might be faster and easier, depending, than going to Jeff City. And it's also potential for, again, less red tape, more streamlined processes. I understand that you all have a red tape initiative going on right now. Even though the Constitution, like I said, it's kind of a layer on top of your ordinances, it doesn't replace your ordinances. To the extent it says something that's inconsistent with your ordinances, your charter is going to govern. So once a charter is in place, you're going to want to go through all of your ordinances and make sure that they're consistent, make any changes that might be necessary as a result of the charter changes. And so part of your red tape initiative might be accomplished through that second step of the process, going through those ordinances after the charter is passed. If your citizens wish to adopt a charter. So I want to talk a little bit more about the process itself. It's not so easy. It is complicated, or at least time-consuming, or it takes a while. I've put down here that the timeline is approximately 18 months to 2 years. That's because it's a multi-step process. First, it's either through an initiative, through gathering petition signatures, or through an ordinance that would be passed by the council of asking the question or putting on the ballot a question of, should we form a charter commission, or should we, yes, form a charter commission to frame a charter. At the same time that question goes on the ballot, an election of commissioners also happens. So when the city decides if there's an ordinance passed to put this on the ballot, there's also at the same time going to be applications that go out, and members of the community can apply to be on the commission. They have to get signatures. I believe it's, let's see, I don't have this number in front of me, but it's a certain percentage, and it's a fairly small percentage. I think it's 2% or something of signatures in order to get on the ballot. 13 people end up being members of the Charter Commission, and so the top 13 vote getters are the ones that will form the Charter Commission. Then the Charter Commission is really responsible for drafting the charter, not the council. They're going to be separate from the council, but they could meet with the council. They will certainly meet with city staff. They will meet with the mayor. They will meet with the administrator and get an idea of, well, how is the system working now? How do we want the system to work? But it's really this independent commission now that makes the decisions. And then once they've completed their work, and I want to say that process, from the time that they're formed, they have 1 year to complete their work and for the charter to go back on the ballot for the voters to consider. They could put the whole thing on the ballot as for one vote, or they could have different sections or alternatives if they can't decide. But typically, I would say it's one charter that someone's going to be voting on. When there's a charter in place and they're considering amendments and you go through the commission process, that's when you get more of a breakup of different sections or a number of different questions that would go on your ballot. Then it's, like I said, submitted to the voters. If they pass it, then it becomes basically your constitution for the city. So 18 months to 2 years, that's a decent timeline. It could take more, it could take less. During this process, once the commission is appointed or elected, they typically meet weekly, bi-weekly, but as much or as often as is needed in order to sort of frame the government. And there are specific questions and things that they're going to be going through and trying to decide. Here are some of those decisions. What are the powers? Oh,
Jackie,
sure.
of those 13, can the mayor or board of aldermen, can they be on that commission? Can elected officials be on the commission?
I do not believe so, but I will double check that.
Are we asking questions as we go, or are we waiting until the end?
I think we should ask
Okay,
as we
However
go.
you'd like, sure.
so the role of the 13 commission members, I guess, Can you give me a little more in depth on that? And how long do they hold those positions?
They hold those positions for the year that they're framing the charter. So they get appointed, or there's the election, and then they have 1 year in order to bring a charter back to the residents in order to vote. So they're going to be an independent group. They're not going to be part of this, I mean, they're part of the city, but they're not under the city. It's not like they look to the mayor or the administrator for how they would work. They're independent.
So they have, these 13 as a body can get together and they're basically making the rules for this new charter, our Constitution, without any input from anyone outside of those 13?
So typically, whenever you have the group, there's a facilitator. Typically, it would be a lawyer like me or someone else that is meeting with them that has been through this process, that says, here's what we're going to do, here's how you do your job. And part of the way they do your job, or the way any facilitator is going to encourage them, is you say, well, here are some examples, here are the things we're going to talk about, and in order for you to, there's a section on finance, for example. Well, you can't make decisions, a commissioner of 13 can't make those decisions without understanding how finance currently works. So they would be meeting with the finance director, perhaps members of the finance department. They would hopefully be meeting with one or more of you all to try to understand what the, how it works, what doesn't work. And then at the end of that, once they have sort of an idea, or it could be throughout the process, typically they also have public forums where they can let the community know what they're looking at, what they're considering, and get community feedback.
The ultimate decision will lie within those 13 members.
Yes, that's right.
Which sounds a little nerve-wracking to me.
So I think the key is making sure that there are qualified individuals in your city that want to run and that want to commit the time and energy to do the work.
So Jackie, a few qualifying questions. The 13 are determined by the people that want to be on the committee, those that receive the highest number of votes.
Yes.
So, Clay, out of the community, let's say 30 people sign up to be commissioners. The more people they get signatures from,
The vote is then on the ballot, so it's not based on signatures.
so what names?
Signatures gets you on the ballot, and then it's a regular election.
So in this example, if there were 30 that applied, would all 30 names go on the ballot?
Yes.
Okay, and so the highest number of 13 become the commissioners. The commission is really set up for just the 1 year,
That's right.
because after that 1 year, then the new constitution, if you will, is in place.
Yes.
Now, those 13 don't determine what's on the Constitution. They propose what's on it, and then it goes to the voters to vote yes or no. And it's an up or down vote.
Correct. Simple majority.
So it's the voters that are going to say.
I missed that part.
Yeah, that's important.
Yes, after they form their charter, then it goes back on the ballot for the.
And if
community
it
to
gets
decide whether
voted
to adopt
down,
it.
does it go through another 1 year process?
If it gets voted down, I think you'd have to start the process over.
Start over, okay. So you start over with who's on the 13th. Marshall?
So is there any way so you said the voters could vote on the entire thing as a whole, or they could vote on pieces of it. Is there any way for the Board of Aldermen to set what that would be when they put forward their initial ordinance? In other words, can you frame the initial ordinance in any way so that it directs the 13? Or for example, can you frame the initial ordinance so that you select the person who is presiding over that, for example?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, that process, we don't even know who they are until the election takes place and the committee is formed. So it's not something that the council can dictate on the front end.
Okay, and then you said you don't believe that elected officials can be those
That's
13.
what I'm going to have to double check on. I don't think so, but I will.
Please
I will
do,
double
because
check.
that's
Yes.
a big point for me, because I would also want to know if city administrator can, city staff, directors, if you're on a board for the city.
So within the state, it's in the Constitution, and it does not, I can tell you, it doesn't outline who's qualified and not qualified, other than, generally speaking, it needs to be a qualified elector from the city. So it means it has to be a resident of the city that's capable of voting, that's registered to vote. So if you're, I don't know where your administrator lives, but if she didn't live in the city, then that would disqualify. The question I'm going to have to look at is, beyond the four corners of the Constitution, are there any other limits that would apply? I apologize for not having that answer for you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay, so since the requirements are pretty much you're a certain age and you can vote, you can also apply to be on the commission, so it could actually, I mean, just thinking outside the box, it could actually be 30 employees from the city of Branson.
If they live here.
Okay, so thank you.
Any other questions from the alderman? Nope. Okay, Jackie, this
Okay.
is enlightening. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So next, I'll just go through some of the decisions that a charter commission are going to make. First, what are the powers? Generally, charters say that the city reserves for itself all powers that might be allowed to it under the Constitution. That's basically anything that is allowed. If the state General Assembly allows something or allows cities to do something, you would be allowed to do it. So the only things you can't do are the things that the state constitution or the state statutes basically, or your charter prohibit you from doing.
Can I question about that?
Sure.
Does that effectively then negate Dillard's rule for us when you're a charter
no.
city?
No,
So help me understand the difference there then, because if we're no longer, if we can do anything that the state allows a city to do, is there still, what are the limitations and where are they set?
basically, the Constitution are the limitations. So if the Constitution says, you know, for example, cities can't loan money, right, for private purposes, or in order to loan X amount of money or take out a loan for X amount of money, you have to have a vote of the people. All of those stay in place, no change.
Jacqueline,
And those
can
are
you-
constitutional as opposed to statutory, right?
Correct.
Jackie, can you pull that mic up on the top there so it's closer to your face? We have people online that say they can't hear.
Okay, I'll try to
And
speak
if you
louder.
need to set it up on this thing to make it closer to you,
I don't think I can.
it doesn't? Okay.
All right. So.
Are there any other questions from any alderman? Nope. Okay, thank you, Jackie.
Okay, so next it's going to be a question of, do you want a council or a board of aldermen? I mean, I don't know that the terminology matters all of that much, but different things that you can do is, instead of having wards, you could have everyone elected at large, or you could have a number of wards, and you could decide the size of your wards. You can decide the number of council members. You can decide how often they're elected. I believe state law says that you have to be elected at least every 4 years, but within that, you can sort of determine how, you know, what the cadence is within that among your board members. You can determine the qualifications. You can determine, like I said, the terms of office, if it's 4 years, 3 years. You can determine term limits, for example. So those are all things that you can determine and that you can decide and set forth within your charter. Whether you have a city administrator or a mayor, or both, of course, and who holds the powers? Is it going to be, like, who's your day-to-day manager in the city? Everyone I work with, and I would say the vast majority, well, actually not everyone I work with. I have one city that is a mayor-managed city, but the vast majority are city administrator or city manager managed, so that you have a professional in that role and not an elected official. But you would put in the charter, if whether you have a city administrator or mayor or both, you would again put within your charter how they are elected, how they are appointed, how they can be removed, what their qualifications are, what their powers are, what their duties are. All of that can be set forth within your charter. You can also include your administrative organization. So who are your department heads? What does your personnel system look like? Typically, what I recommend on those is that it's a little bit more broad than getting into the nitty-gritty. Again, because you want to remain flexible. So you can say that we'll have a personnel system and that it will be set forth via ordinance. And maybe you include in there, and when there's a change to the personnel system, you're required to give 30 days notice to all employees. something like that, but not your nitty-gritty of, you know, here are all of your employees, here's their comp scale. None of that goes into the charter. It's just very, very high level.
Hold on a sec, Jackie.
Sure.
Solon, any comments online about, can they hear Jackie?
I haven't gotten any other feedback, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chad, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I've gotten no other feedback. Just, stay in the mic as close as we can, and I think we'll be okay. Yeah, thank you.
So maybe if you would, Jackie, if you would just speak up a little bit. Thank you.
I was gonna say, next time I'll wear flats. Again, financial procedures is another example. You'll want to say, well, there's a balance here as well of how much detail do you want in your financial procedures, having within your finance department, are there big picture things that you want them to do? But those, again, the nitty gritty, the dollar limits of how much they can spend, the RFP process, all of that, those are things that you could put in your charter, but are probably recommended to go more and remain in your ordinances where you have them, because it means that, with inflation, for example, you don't have to go to the voters to change those numbers. You can just do it more without having a whole election to do it. You just do it through an ordinance change. Let's see. Nomination and election. I think that's just back to your council and your board of aldermen. You can also have procedures for initiatives and referendums. Those are all procedures that you would put forth in your charter. Again, those are the types of constitutional things you want.
Question on that?
Yeah, but even without that last bullet point, like let's say there was no language that the charter created about that last bullet point, the process set forward by state statute allows for the amendment of the charter by the citizens already, correctly?
Of course, yes.
Do you know what number of signatures is required? Is that a process that can be started by citizens, or does that have to come from Board of Aldermen?
No, it can come three ways. The commission, a new commission, you can have the city council pass an ordinance. You just pass an ordinance calling for an election to put on the ballot the question of whether or not to amend the charter, or a petition that comes from not less than 10% of your qualified electors. So let's say the council is ignoring them and the community wants something else, there's a method.
And that first option of a new charter being formed, that also comes from the board, right?
Or it could come from the city.
Same 10%?
It's the same process.
Question on that same procedure. Our state constitution has become one heck of a mess because of this referendum capability. They treat it like regulations instead of a constitution. What's been your experience in the charter version of that? Is the tendency of the cities to do the same kind of churn on the charter, or does it stay fairly?
It stays fairly the same unless there becomes an issue to deal with. And part of the reason is that an election is not very cheap. And so that's why on the front end, it's really important to make sure you're making your decisions, or the commission is making their decisions of really what needs to go in here and what are the really big picture things that should go in here versus the things that really should be decided by ordinance instead, so that you don't have that issue.
I saw, I spent some time reading through other cities' charters in preparation for this, and maybe it's back to some of the questions that were asked earlier, but when I read through them, I see things that I would say were fairly glaring technical issues that the commission didn't handle properly. And let me just give you an example that, as an alderman, stood out to me. The ability to recall aldermen, fine, that's, that's part of the process. But, they would write it such that you're elected by a ward, but you're recalled by any percent within the city. Things like that you just kind of look at and say, well, that doesn't quite seem right, for once you've established wards that you would allow the other wards to essentially vote out the alderman that one ward voted in. Things like that. And there were other examples. How can we avoid, if we've got this independent commission working on this thing, how can we avoid those technical errors? Is it up to you as if you were the law firm representing us on that, is that your job, or how does that happen?
No, the board will have, generally, the board will have its own representation. And it's a lawyer, but they're like the facilitator, and they're the ones that are going to be making sure that all of the parts of the charter make sense. Or if there is a discrepancy like that, typically, like I said, there will be areas or times for public comment, or maybe even board comment throughout the process. And those are the things where you all can say, hey, well, that doesn't make sense here because would you all reconsider that? Until it goes to the voters, it's not final and it's just a working and moving document until it gets finalized.
Can redistricting be a part of this?
Yes. Because you'll get to make your own decision on, I mean, you could even do elections at large, It just depends on how it gets framed. Okay. So I have a conclusion here, but of course, I can answer any other questions that you all may have. But big picture, something to think about, and I know I've alluded to this earlier, which is when you're following the fourth class charter or the fourth class statutes, it's really a one-size-fits-all. The city of Branson has a lot of really unique things going on. It's got the tourism market, it's got a very large infrastructure, it's got a very large budget, which is just not the typical fourth-class city. And so a charter would allow you to be more unique and do things that fit you a little more than you have right now. It is a popular opinion, especially if you want flexibility, customization, if there are things that you're not able to do right now. And it also allows you, like I said earlier, to minimize red tape and try to make the city work better for staff, for the citizens, for the board, for the administration, for everyone involved. So I can take questions. I did have just a couple example questions up here. So, and I think I've already touched on this, which is what happens to the code when the charter is passed. The code stays in place, other than to the extent that it is inconsistent with the charter. It would need to be updated. But that would be something that you would do after it's passed, and something that obviously you would work with your city attorney on. The city of Branson is not limited by its population. You need at least 5,000 residents to become a charter city, which you obviously have. And then we already talked about this, how a charter is changed once passed. There are 3 different ways that can happen, and it just depends on, which process and procedure happens in whatever issue you're facing. So happy to answer any additional questions you all have.
Marshall?
Mine is just a simple request, Jackie. When you find out the answer on whether alderman or mayor, could you get that maybe to Solon and he'll maybe redirect it to us or something? Thank you very much.
Question?
Sure.
You kind of talked about the timeline. What about cost and resources and things to do? You mentioned that the commission would probably want to meet with the administrator, the mayor, and other people. How much do you tend to tie up the existing resources as you're going through this process? And, what would be a typical budget from your experience?
So typical budget depends on how many times they want to meet and making sure that they have facilitator or legal counsel. I did do some calculations on that, and I think I came up with around, depending on everything that they would do, some may meet quicker and make decisions faster, some may be slower, want to meet more often. Typically, the facilitator is the one that's sort of trying to keep that balance and not let them mull too much over certain decisions. But I think the budget would be somewhere around, I mean, I hesitate to say this because it can go up or down based on a lot of different factors, but I'll give you a throw-out budget of $100,000. And that's not including your vote, the election that you have to have, the 2 elections.
How might political subdivisions within the city sort of either be affected by or have maybe some veto power on? I think about our 76 CID, for example. I'm not sure if I can think of an example of how the charter could directly affect something related to that. Maybe there isn't one.
No, and typically we write into the charters language that says that all existing ordinances, all existing taxes, all existing, SIDS and TIDs and all of those things are not impacted by the charter change. So that there's comfort there that there's no intent and there will be no change when the charter goes into effect. So the intention is that there is no change and that the charter would not impact any of that.
So Jackie, looking at the big picture, to have all this accomplished within 1 year,
It's a lot.
that's an awful lot.
Well, the good news is the election doesn't have to be within the 1 year. The election just sort of starts your 1 year.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So the first election starts your.
For the 13 people, starts the 1 year clock.
Yes, yeah. And honestly, maybe, I know it seems like fast, but you also want to keep a timeline on them because you could mull things forever. And it gives incentive for them to do their work at a decent pace.
So with the facilitator, would they start off with, here's the existing structure of the city. What changes would you like to be made? Versus, here's a blank piece of paper and start writing all this.
So you're never going to start with a blank piece of paper. Generally, in Missouri, the Missouri Municipal League has a model charter that typically I would provide to the commission. And then also to say, look at the different cities that you might be that are around here or that are of similar size to you or maybe similar, have things going on, like the city of St. Charles, for example. They've got a lot of tourism, it's more similar than like St. Louis County, for example. But look at something that you might feel like is similar and look at those charters and so you don't start with a blank slate. You would start with the simple charters and then also layer in, well, what do we have now? What do we like of what we have now? And what maybe could we do better?
Marshall?
But Jackie, is there a certain amount of creativity that's allowed to be involved in this? So for example, could you say, we're going to allow it where we have one alderman from each ward and then 3 at-large spots? I mean, is that level of creativity allowed within
Yes.
this as well?
From where we sit today, what's the timeline? Do we have to sync up with the normal election dates for the election of the commissioners?
So your election is going to be at the same time as the election of the commissioners. So really, it's what's the next election that you would want to target getting on? You're really too late for April. It would have to be sometime after that. But then you would work back from there because you still have to follow the election calendar for those commissioners to pick up their application and to get in their application. That's from, for April, that's December, mid-December to the end of December, everything to be certified by the end of January. So it's a lot that sort of has to happen. So you would just want to look at whatever election date in the future that you want to target and then try to work back from that.
Are we allowed to go to the August election dates or only the April dates?
No, any election that's on the calendar you can use.
However, if nothing else is on the ballot for August, then the fees for the election itself
Exactly,
would be something to consider.
right. If you have something else on the ballot, it's always cheaper.
As far as like applying for grants and stuff, is there any impact versus a fourth-class city versus a charter city, or is there any advantages or disadvantages that they look at?
I don't know the answer to that directly, but I would say that probably not, because you have, maybe there are specific grants that have city classification requirements. I'm not aware of any. But that's more of I think staff might be able to better guide you on that.
Good question, Clay.
Question.
Yeah, for sure. Artie?
Once this is all finalized, when would this take effect?
After the election, on the charter amendment itself. On the charter creation itself.
The next day?
That's a good question.
What was your question?
I don't,
When would it
let
take
me,
effect? If we change to a charter city from a fourth class?
yeah. I'll look at that and get back to you.
Anyone else? Kathy?
You know, I hesitate to be the one to ask this question, but I think it needs to be asked, so just take it for how it's meant here. So once the charter is established, do you have to have a new election for your elected officials at that point, especially if you have changed, you know, the makeup of the board?
So typically, it would say that your existing officials are going to stay and carry out the rest of their term, right? That doesn't change. But then their next election would be based upon the new charter. So you don't lose anything that's sort of already in place, doesn't get your elected officials, your, you know, your department heads and all of that. Those things are not going to change. And then that's why we include, as I mentioned earlier, language that basically saves all of the things and the people and the salaries. Like all of that stays and then would start with the next sort of election.
But Jackie, what if something, because I think you said there's mayor-run cities, right? So what if we have a charter, I love you, we eliminate the city administrator, right?
So your
Is that
charter
what
would
happens
say,
then?
yeah. You would build, they would build into the charter what that looks like. Yeah. Yes. You build in the first time, and then, just like your boards and commissions, you stagger based on, you know, when their time is up. It would be something similar, but typically it's built in. There's some language that would allow you to do that.
So Marshall, it sounds like these 13 commissioners, they would have the authority to put into the new rules that there's no there's no city administrator, there's no mayor, and there's no alderman, right? All the decisions are made by a city manager. Is that correct?
That's a good question. I've never had that question before.
Again,
So then-
what makes me nervous?
Okay.
Well, just the way that government, I don't think that would be feasible, just because the way government works, the way municipalities work in Missouri.
Okay, but a
is
city
you have
administrator and the mayor could be eliminated, and the decisions are just run by aldermen.
I believe you could do that.
Okay.
That would be
Or
I have some thoughts on that.
couldn't the charter sort of like elect themselves as the,
No, I don't think they'd be allowed to do that. Yeah. Even all elected officials would have to still go through a new election. Can't appoint people.
And so Artie, to answer one of your questions, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie, so there has to be an election for the 13 commissioners. They have up to a year to make the proposed charter language, if you will. And then that language would have to go to the voters to be approved on. It'd be interesting with the guidance of council that to have all of that approved by the voters at one time sounds like that's a pretty tall ask,
Yeah,
right?
because I was thinking the same thing. Let's say there's 100 different bullet points, and there's two that just, they can't live with. So the whole thing's just null and void, and you start over because of,
Start over.
That gets to the point of what can be done is the whole thing go on the ballot, or if they can't decide, maybe there are two different alternatives that they're considering for something. You could break those out from the big charter and have alternatives for the community to consider. The Constitution allows that.
yeah, but initially, there's got to be that first one.
The Charter Commission could put alternatives on the ballot,
Oh,
yes.
okay, so.
A, B, or C.
okay, I got you.
One more, Jackie. So it seems that a lot of governments are designed for that tiebreaker option. For instance, we have an even number of aldermen, the mayor, right? In some of the discussions that's happened, I mean, we've been talking about Charter City for at least studying it in broad factors for a long time.
Yeah.
I've heard that there are cities where the mayor votes. Or for instance, let's say we added aldermen, but we added an uneven number. Are there specifications where like you need to still have an even number so that tie gets broken, or, no?
No, but good governance would say that you should build that in, right? Yep. So I've got some councils where the mayor does vote and some where the mayor does not vote. You know, some where the mayor has a lot of powers and some where the mayor is, you know, just basically a council member, but they run the meetings and appoint the boards and commissioners with the, you know, with the vote of the council.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of flexibility in how you would do that.
Any other questions?
And Jackie, can you just tell them a little bit about the strategy and the detail versus broadness of a charter and why you would keep it more broad than detailed?
Sure, sure. Yeah, and I think one of the examples that I discussed just a little bit earlier was in the finance department, just as an example. Some charters will build in, you know, you have to go get an RFP if you're going to spend more than $5,000. Well, is $5,000 today the same thing as $5,000 in 20 years? And if it's not the same thing, do you want to have to go to the voters to change that $5,000? My cities, the cities that I represent have found that that's too constrictive, really. And so their preference is to keep that in the ordinances so that there is that flexibility. So that's just one area of getting too detailed can sort of hamstring you, the council or the board, in ways that you want to avoid. If you keep them in the ordinances, then you have that flexibility to change as it's needed. But, you know, the number of council members, the number of wards, how the elections are run, those would definitely all go in the charter.
So essentially, the success of the charter at the ballot could really hinge on how general and how specific the commission really gets. So, you know, as council, I would hope that they would do something more broad that just gives the city the powers, the broad powers, and the residents can trust the people that they vote to make the fine details.
Yep, that's right. Well, and if you keep it broad, it means that if there's some sort of challenge by a resident or the voters to something within the charter, if you keep it broad, there's less likely a challenge. If there was a challenge and you put it in the ordinance, it's just so much easier to fix it.
Okay, well, before we run out of time, Jackie, that was very, very informative.
Thank you.
I know-
Happy to be here, and I will look at those questions for you, Mayor, and get back to you.
Yep, and like Marshall said, we've been talking about this for a long time. This is the most information that myself or this board has received, which answered a lot of questions and also raised a lot of questions. So I believe the next step would be for this board to consider what's said, and what I would encourage would be to have another study session where we get input from the community on their thoughts of how they would like their city run.
And maybe one where we kind of discuss a little bit more some of the things
Yeah.
too, because we're really not supposed to discuss this kind of thing in a forum where it's four or more of us. So maybe something like that as well.
That's right, that's right. Yeah. Any other comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second. Did you get that, Hillary?
Yes, sir.
I missed you, Hillary. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you. We'll begin our Board of Aldermen meeting at 6 o'clock. Thank you.